Does this take the glare off of my head? You always have to be experimenting. Gotta try new stuff. Good morning. Hello. It's Tuesday morning. It says on my phone that we are live. So we're doing some follow-up like we try to do every week. Taking some aspect of our previous Sunday morning's message and going deeper with it. It's part of our MO here at Deeper Waters FMC. Is this thing all working? Let's see here. I'm going to turn on. So I've left. Yeah, okay. All right, great. This past Sunday we had a message called Into the Waters. Basically the idea was that Jesus calls us to live a life like him, a life that pursues those who are lost, who are hurting, who are drowning in the weight and the sin and the evil of this world, and through self-sacrificial love to pull them out, to come in his name, empowered by his Spirit, to bring his truth and his light and his love to people who are lost and hurting. That was sort of the overall arching theme Sunday, Into the Waters. What I want to do today is maybe start up a conversation on one little part of that. So in doing so, I want to look at Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. We're going to be floating around that verse a lot here, Deeper Waters, the next few months. But here's what it says. Paul says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood." You might have a translation that says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood." Anyway, the idea is we're not fighting against flesh and blood. So our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. So there's two halves to that. Shiloh, my goodness, I haven't seen you forever. Hope you're doing well. There's two halves to that verse, all right? So the first half, Paul says, "For we wrestle not," or our struggle isn't against flesh and blood, meaning people, right? Humans, human beings. Truth is, if we're all honest with each other, we do have struggle with people, right? I mean, most of our struggles involves other people. People disagree with us. People do horrible things to other people, right? We've all had people hurt us, whether through words or physically or their actions, right? I mean, in some sense, we do fight against people, or at least people fight against us, right? But Paul says that's really not what's going on. He says we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, against other people. In other words, other people, from a biblical New Testament view, people aren't the enemy. There's something else. And Paul says what we do wrestle with are the powers, the rulers, the authorities, the powers of this dark world, and the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. So he says we don't really, our fight, even though it expresses itself maybe through people, that's really not our fight. Our fight is spiritual. Our fight is against what's going on behind the scenes in the spiritual world that is causing, affecting, influencing people to act as our enemies, right? To fight against us. And he says our call is not to fight against people, whoever they are, whatever they're doing. Our call is to fight what has them bound, what has them influenced, what is corrupting their hearts that makes them do the things that they're doing. In other words, we're not fighting against people. We're fighting for people by fighting against the rulers and the authorities and the powers that have them bound. There's no more beautiful picture of that than Jesus, right? He's on the cross. He is suffering. He has been tortured, still being tortured. He's dying the most horrible death that had been invented as a form of execution in that time. And he looks down at the humans, the people, the flesh and blood people who had done this to him and were still doing it to him, and who were laughing about it and mocking him in the middle of it. And he says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Even though Jesus had the authority and the power to simply fight back and wipe them out, right? To just end it immediately, to wipe them out. His response is not to fight against them, but to fight against the powers, the rulers, the authorities that were driving what they were doing. And that's what he did. His act of sacrificial love on the cross is what defeated the powers for the sake of the people. And Paul echoes that in Ephesians 6. He says that's our calling as followers of Jesus. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood. People are not the enemy. We wrestle against the rulers, the authorities, the powers, the spiritual forces of evil that are binding them and driving them to do what they do. So we don't fight against people. We fight for people by fighting against the powers that have them bound. That's the idea of spiritual warfare in the New Testament. So here's my question. So we've been doing these videos to hopefully get a little conversation going, and so my question is this. Here's my little thought for the week that I'd love to hear your thoughts on. It's this. If that really is the case, and as followers of Jesus, we're called not to fight against people, but to fight for people by fighting against the powers that have them bound, then how does that change, or how should that affect how we respond to people who are doing us wrong? It's a hard question. It's a big question. How do we respond to the people who speak to us harshly, or the people at work who maybe undermine us? How do we respond? How do we deal with people who aren't dealing right with us? It's a complicated question. It really is. It's a deep question. It's a question that requires a lot of thought and a lot of prayer and a lot of study and a lot of discussion. But how does that understanding of spiritual warfare direct how we live? How does it affect what we post online? Like, how does that affect how conservatives speak about those liberals on their Facebook page? Or how does that govern how maybe Democrats speak about those Republicans on their Facebook page? How does that direct how we fight when we're not fighting against people, but we're fighting for people, even our enemies, by fighting against the spiritual forces that have them blinded, bound, and are driving what they do? It's a big question. It's a huge question. It's a deep question. There are tons of implications involved in that. But yeah, throwing it out there. I hope it drives you to study. I hope it drives you to pray. I hope it drives you to share your thoughts. So anyway, I love you guys. Have a wonderful week. And man, we'll either see you at Life Group or we'll see you Sunday at our family service. Come hungry. We're going to have breakfast together as part of our service. All right, guys. Love you. We will see you. Hey, Jason Seibert. Have a good day. Bye-bye.